Well, joining us this half hour in the studio once again, Representative Dr. John Bizon. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Richard. It is so good to be with you this morning.
Thank you for being here. One thing we talked about, this timing is kind of interesting. One thing we've talked about over the course of our visits is the straight party ticket issue, which was we thought decided a while back. A breaking story yesterday that a judge has said, "Hold the phone on that." Wow.
I was surprised by that as well, so close to the election, and this is going to cause a little bit of consternation, I am sure.
Boy.
I believe that the administration is going to be going forward with an appeal of the judge's ruling, and
That
we
too, yeah.
anticipate that they are going to ask for an expedited hearing, expedited decision being made as to whether or not there is any credence to having the judge's new ruling, and everyone will be waiting with bated breath. But when you look at the time frame in which this needs to get decided, if it's going to apply to the next election, it is kind of right on those heels
Boy.
that we're going to need to print up the ballots for the absentee voters some 45 days before the actual election.
Boy, and if memory serves me correctly, I think I heard Clerk Norlander say that those were printed already.
I think that for the primary, they probably are. They probably have already gone out, if I were to guess.
Yeah. Right.
Because that's only a couple days away before we're up to the beginning of August, and we have the primary ballots. But this will be more significant in the general election. And yes, they have their work cut out for them when it comes to having that appeal or making the decision that no, they're going to wait until after.
So you voted against this idea
I
back
did.
in, well, when was that? A few months ago.
I want to say back in December,
Yeah.
if memory serves me right, is when that bill, I believe it was 268, was originally passed. But that, again, is a multi-section bill that it had been dealing with a number of different topics, and I've been meeting with constituents this past week, as a matter of fact, and they have concerns with those big multi-section bills, those 53, 55-page bills that deal with a number of different topics, and um, they would very much like to see one bill, one topic sort of activities rather than saying we're going to roll all of these things into one bill. And so right now we will be anticipating submitting a bill that says, yes, we can pass bills, but perhaps we need to go back to one bill for one topic. And we'll be looking at the ramifications of that. I'll be sending that over to the Legislative Service Bureau to get their impression as to how are we going to make this happen.
All right, that's interesting. We'll pick up where we leave off here in just a minute with Representative Dr. John Bizon on WBCK 840 with Representative John Bizon today. If I recall, if my memory serves, when we talked about this issue of the straight party ticket thing, you indicated that you voted against it because some of the constituents with whom you'd spoken and from whom you've heard weren't.
It was
so
not only that, but as I was saying, it was a multi-section bill, and I believe that there were other sections there that, if my memory serves me correctly, had to deal with. I believe this was also the bill that said that if you have a ballot initiative, you had only 180 days to submit the signatures. And so they tweaked the language, even though, and they made it retroactive, even though there were ballot initiatives out there that had been raised under the prior rules. And I think it was those provisions as well. And you're right, there are a number of people who would love to see us move to where you evaluate each of the candidates and you vote on the candidates based upon their personal credits rather than whether they're independent, Republican, or a Democrat.
So, as a concept, the straight party ticket issue, does John Bizon favor that or not favor that?
I think there is much to be said on both sides. We want to make voting easy. If we're going to do this abandonment of the straight party ticket voting,
Hmm.
we need to make voting easy. You know, you can't have people standing in line for 2 hours, especially if they have kids with them, and you know the elderly would find that terribly troublesome, especially if it's a day as warm as today.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way to make voting easy, to increase participation rates so that everyone in the community can participate and can feel that they have a vote in government.
We were talking earlier this week with John Hoadley, your counterpart from Kalamazoo. We're talking about this issue, the straight
Hmm.
party ticket thing. Of course, this news had not advanced yet, but the notion was with the idea that if you don't have straight party ticket voting, then you as a voter you are perhaps more obligated to figure out the candidates and where they stand and so on. And I brought that up with him, and he said, yes, but when we proposed the idea of taking the party affiliation off the ballot, so then you really would have to
Hmm.
do your homework. There was opposition to that, and that was
Well,
removed.
there was an opposition to that from me. You know,
Yeah.
I have to admit that. Um, I didn't hear much discussion of removing all party affiliation off of the ballot.
Hmm.
And
What do you think about that?
I wouldn't mind that at all.
Okay.
I think that, I think that we need to do our homework. We need to know who these candidates are. You need to know what they stand for. And we need to have people who are responsive to their constituency rather than to the party. And however we need to get there, it would be a good trip for me.
Hmm. So the it seems that the argument about keeping straight party ticket voting is that it tends to affect districts with voters with characteristics which you described. They're in line with a limited amount of time. They they tend to hit that straight party ticket slot or draw that line because
It's easy,
it's easy for them
right?
to do. And so, does that, as an argument, hold water with you?
Um, I would much prefer that you vote for the candidate. I
Hmm.
would much prefer that you know the candidates and say, yes, this is the candidate that we want representing us. We want a candidate who is responsive to our needs, and sometimes I think you'll find that on the R side. Sometimes you'll find that on the D side,
Hmm.
and you really have to go out there and know who you are voting for. And I don't think that, given how important our independence is, given how important our voting rights are, it's not bad to say we need to do a little bit of homework so that we have some idea as to who we are voting for, both up and down the ticket. And, from that standpoint, I would say it is a good thing to know who you're voting for rather than going straight party,
Hmm.
you know.
On the other hand, if it takes a lot of time, maybe the
Yeah,
straight
and
party thing's easier.
it's a whole lot easier, and we need to make sure that everyone can do that, uh, vote easily, and we need to make sure that they don't have to stay in line forever. And one of the ideas that were floated at the time this was passed, that passed through the House, as a matter of fact, but did not get through the Senate, was the idea of being able to show up. There was no reason absentee voting, so that you could
Right.
show up at any point prior to the election, show your credentials, say, I would like my ballot, I'd like to vote my ballot because I don't want to spend 2 hours in line
Yeah.
on election day, and get it done yourself and do your civic duty that day. And I thought that that was a great answer, so that we would, for whatever reason, that didn't make it through the Senate, and I
Hmm.
was very, very disappointed that that portion of the law didn't make it through the Senate.
Representative John Bizon's with us on WBCK. More in just a minute. Okay, Representative John Bizon is here for a few more minutes. So, a couple final thoughts on the whole straight party ticket issue, and some of the details of all of this, the making voting easier concept to which you refer was referred to by Representative Hoadley when he was talking to us. And he and a counterpart have introduced that Voters' Bill of Rights and talked
Mhm.
about early voting and some of these ideas. I presume that some of those ideas might find common ground with folks like you.
I'm sure that they would. I think that people have a duty to come out and vote in an election. And it is a great privilege that is afforded to us that so many people in the world don't have. And yet, that is something that has made America great. And I have to admit that um, there are too many people that stay home for too many different reasons. And if we could make voting easy, if we could go out there and solicit their opinions, that we as a country would be a stronger country.
Mm-hmm. Now, so much of that whole straight party ticket issue falls on the political planes, but you've made a point that if we make it easier, maybe that's something to consider.
Oh, we have to.
Yeah. Republican National Convention. It's all set now.
Quite the show, if I may say, and always a little bit of theatrics mixed
Oh
in
yeah.
altogether. I was impressed with the speeches initially by Donald Trump Jr.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he did an excellent job in his presentation, and I said, wow, he'd make a great presidential candidate as well, and we wouldn't even have to change the signs. uh, and then there was Eric, who was speaking the next day, and I said, wow, we wouldn't have to change the signs. And
Yeah.
again, he gave a very nice, and I was impressed with all of Trump's kids last night. Ivana, same thing, very, very eloquent in her ideas. And, I was surprised, even in the assembly, that there was significant support for the LGBT community. There was support for the unions. There was support for the working men and women throughout the entire building, and I can see why Trump has the appeal that he does, that crosses the line, that when you take a look at his previous performance, he won in 37 states. He won by or with some 14 million votes, more votes than had ever been cast in previous primaries. And I was walking away scratching my head saying, how did he do this? And it seems like he does that by appealing to a crowd that has largely been left behind by prior administrations, that he has reached out to a quadrant and has been able to resonate with voters that have not traditionally voted on the Republican side of the House, as far as I can tell. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the campaign continues at this point.
Some Republicans are with him, some are not.
I was surprised at how much unity there was at the end of the convention in Cleveland. That, yes, there are a few people who have boycotted it, but among the delegates that were there, among the people who are representing most directly the voters, there was significant support within the confines of that convention. And if he can translate that into support among the voters and support among all of the groups that have been marginalized by prior administrations, I think that we are going to uh, see surprising results from this election.
So you're behind him.
I think that given the choices that we have out there, that um, I am a conservative.
Right.
I believe in God. I believe in life. I believe in conservative values. Um, I see those being threatened. We pretend that there is a constitutional right to health care, and there is not a constitutional right to the Second Amendment that you can get in there and read. And I walk away confused as to where that statement would have come from. Um, and no, given the choices in this next election, I feel that it becomes even more important given the fact that we're going to be appointing Supreme Court justices in the very near future.
Right.
And that appointment of Supreme Court justices would lead me to say there is only one person that I can be supportive of.
All right, you've been in the district, of course, here in the summer, and you'll be in various locations over the next day or two, in fact, where folks can meet you and talk with you.
Right. We're going to have one of our usual breakfast hours over at, I'm trying to think of where we are this week. Coffee hour at the Lux
There
Cafe on Capitol Avenue. That'll be from 8 to 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. We anticipate being at Family Day at Claude Evans Park a little bit later in the day as well. Um, in between the two, I anticipate making a stop at the campaign office. So if you want to sit and talk with me at 9 o'clock in a campaign setting, then we'll be happy to see you at the campaign office. If you'd like to do it as a district representative, then I'd recommend the Lux Cafe early in the morning. And
and that's tomorrow.
And that is tomorrow. That's going to be Saturday.
Okay. 8 to 9. Right?
8 to 9. And then 9 till 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then later in the day over at Claude Evans.
Okay. Representative Dr. John Bizon, thank you as always.
Thank you so much, Richard. Always a pleasure.
Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
8:20.